Hey, all. Thanks for listening to Pacific Northwest Sports Podcast. I had the amazing opportunity to interview Mark Branch. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mark is the head coach at the University of Wyoming. He has really brought the wrestling program back to relevance. Something that I think is really interesting is Mark was actually a 4-time All-American as well as an academic All-American. He won 2 different NCAA championships at the 1994 and 1997 championship at 167 pounds. He was a national freestyle All-American as well, Big 12 Athlete of the Year, OSU Student Athlete of the Year. I mean, really just was an amazing person over at Oklahoma State University. Mark has countless accolades, and multiple different times throughout the podcast, you're going to hear me mention those to him, and he almost shrugs them off as if it was just, yeah, I did that. Mark was amazing to interview. His background is amazing. He was named head coach on July 14th of 2008 at Wyoming. He's going into his 14th year. He's gone to 5-0 and a share of the collegiate conference regular season title. Everything you can think of in terms of a coach, he's accomplished, and certainly has done that as a player. He's coached over 57 different All-Americans and 16 different NCAA championships. So I really hope you guys enjoy this podcast. It was something that I had a very special time to do. And let me know your thoughts. Here's the podcast. Enjoy. I'm here with Mark Branch, the head coach at University of Wyoming. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Of course. Hey, so you are the head coach of Wyoming. You're going into year now, is this 16 or 17?
16.
All right. And you've had a long career. A lot of it's tied together with Oklahoma State, but you've also had the privilege of leading Wyoming to joining the Big 12 for wrestling.
Yeah, for sure. Now, probably about half and half, it seems like now. I'm not sure exactly, but it feels like probably about half my time here, we were in the Western Wrestling Conference, and now we've been in the Big 12 Conference for, I think, 7 or 8 years. So, it's been quite a journey.
All right. I wanted to hit on some things and start people off, and you can interject there. So you were a wrestler at Oklahoma State from 1994 to 1997. You were also a All-American all 4 of those years. And what I also found really impressive is you were an academic All-American as well.
Yeah, for sure.
How were you able to balance the classroom and the physical demand of being a D1 wrestler every day?
I didn't work extremely hard at school. I just kept up. I just did my assignments and crammed for tests like a lot of college students. But the one thing I know, I never allowed myself to get behind in classes, and I think just time management was a huge part of that. I look back and obviously I'm proud of being a 4-time academic All-American, but I know that my heart and soul was in wrestling. It wasn't necessarily in school, but I knew it was important to keep up with school. It was important to do well in school. I emphasize that as a coach. I believe that the fact that I wasn't really stressed out about school allowed me to really focus on wrestling when it was most important. I didn't have to worry about failing classes. I didn't have to worry about trying to get in assignments late. So a lot of those just tactics were of being responsible and managing my time well, I think helped me succeed in both areas. And I look back and like, man, maybe I should have poured more into my schooling and even done better. But here I am, a college coach, and I guess I'm doing my dream job. So I guess I shouldn't have any regrets, but I know I didn't like bust my hump. Like I saw a lot of people, one of my college roommates really worked hard at school, and that was his main priority. And I just know that I was able to keep my focus on wrestling because I stayed up with it.
Okay. And I saw that you were a two-time NCAA champion at the 167 weight class in 94 and 97.
Correct.
What is the feeling of winning a NCAA championship?
Oh man, it's hard to describe, you know. I mean, it was something that I dreamed about probably in high school, watching some of my heroes win NCAA championships. And then I think when you get probably a lot of people, when they get to experience Division I wrestling and especially the program that I was in and the teammates I was surrounded by, it didn't take long for it to feel like it was probably never going to happen. I mean, I honestly went through a long period where I would have just been happy to be a starter, you know? And so you get separated a little bit from your dreams that you had as a kid, and reality hits you. And I tell you what, I don't know, you know, I would say probably most college wrestlers go through that where they question themselves, question if they're capable, if they're good enough, you know? So that kind of that long journey back to realizing that dream, you know, there's a lot that goes into that, whether it's just the hours, the time commitment, you know, the weight cutting, the nutritional aspect of it, the injury aspect, which I don't think very many college wrestlers go through a season without getting banged up to some degree. And you go through that whole process and to realize that dream that you had as a kid is, it's surreal. You know, I remember the one I won in 94. I've explained it as there's a lot I don't remember about what happened right after that, because I think I was just in a fog and in a daze, and I don't think I could believe that it happened. You know, so it was really a strange feeling. And both national championships, I think I had different feelings and different reactions, but it's certainly something that's special, and I hold special to this day.
And that 94 championship, that was as a freshman, correct?
Yes.
So what was that feeling? Now, after you win that title, are you like, all right, well, I'm going to go 4 for 4. I'm going to win them all?
You know, my teammate, Pat Smith, had, and he was the weight below me. So he had just made Division I history just minutes before I took the mat by being the first 4-timer. So certainly it was the subject of the weekend, and I got asked that. I got that tossed around quite a bit, and certainly it was something that was, you know, right on my mind of, hey, you know, you can't win 4 unless you win 1. You know, so right then I had got that first step, and certainly at that point, you know, my mindset had changed where I truly felt like anything was possible, you know, and so it's not that I set out and like I had to do this, but you know, I certainly felt like I was capable of, and I believed in myself. And you know, throughout that freshman year, that was something that I struggled with, and so coming off a very mediocre regular season and winning a national championship instilled a lot of belief in me and in the process that I had been going through.
And so what was 95 and 96 like?
95, actually, I had a lot better season. I had a lot more consistency, but you know, like how I explained, those feelings of winning national championships were quite different. It was the same thing, because in 94, I had absolutely no pressure on me. I wasn't expected to even be the starter. I wasn't expected to qualify for NCAAs. I certainly wasn't expected to All-American. And you know, I to this day have the I guess historical honor of being the only Division I wrestler to ever enter that tournament with a losing record and come out winning a national championship. So I went from absolutely no pressure on me to I put that pressure on myself. And you just said it, you know, yeah, I thought about winning 4 national titles, and now I felt like every time I stepped out there, I was supposed to win. I felt like I had to win. We also had a pretty young team in 95. So we won the team title as a team in 94, and we lost quite a few veterans off that team. So I came back as a sophomore and felt like I needed to be a leader. I was certainly the highest returning placer, and I went from being very unimportant in the lineup to feeling like I was the key figure in the lineup. And so, yeah, I mean, I dealt with that pressure, and that was a learning process. And I think every loss is always hard, but now I just felt like I let everybody down. I felt like, that I just wasn't living up to what I was supposed to do. So I took the losses harder, but in retrospect, I had a much better season, a much more consistent season, and my team could depend on me. So I had a good season. I won my first Big 12 title, we were still in the Big 8 back then. It was still called the Big 8, but won my first conference title. Whereas the year before I got third, and then went into the NCAA tournament as the number 2 seed this time, instead of unseeded with a losing record, and ended up losing to a nemesis of mine in the finals, and I think a 1 or 2 point match. It was heartbreaking. It was very heartbreaking. And the funny thing is, the year before, if I would have probably got second at NCAAs, I would have been jumping for joy. But I found a closet to climb into, literally in the arena. I found a dark closet where they had some old basketball goals stored, and I found a place to slump over and cried my woes away for quite a while. I mean, I was crushed. I was hurt. I realized that dream of winning 4 was gone. Not that it was the most important thing to me, not that I had set that out as this is a do or die, but it did close the door on that, and it was hard and it was hurtful, and I had quite a few injuries through that season, and the week after NCAAs, I had done a lot of damage to my shoulder, so I had a torn rotator cuff. I had separated my shoulder, and I had to have a piece of bone taken out. And so I had my shoulder fixed, those 2 places, and then I had the meniscus in my knee fixed. And really through that summer and heading into my junior season, I felt as good as I'd ever felt as a Division I wrestler.
I feel like wrestlers don't get enough credit for how freaking tough they have to be. It's literally a battle you are going through. I mean, it's strength, and there's technique too, but it is strength against strength every single time you're going against someone. And unlike, wrestling is a team sport, but you're relying on yourself out there. So you don't have a time where you can look at, maybe your guard next to you or your tackle and go, hey, double this guy with me real quick. It is mano a mano, and you have to be the best.
Yeah, and it's, it truly is a combat sport, and it's a very physical contact sport, and you get your body contorted in some pretty strange and amazing directions, and it takes a toll on you, and here as a 49-year-old, I feel every match I ever wrestled, I don't regret a thing, and I wouldn't take it back, but I feel it. I feel those matches every day when I wake up, and I think a lot of people probably that have been through the sport like I have can relate to that. And it is a badge of honor and something that we pride ourselves in, and we try to put ourselves on a pedestal, say what we do is unmatched, by others and by other sports. And and there are a lot of tough sports out there, but there's not a tough sport where they have to make weight every week too. Throw that on top of the physicality of the sport. It does stand out, and it's unique. And I feel like it's a fraternity that I'm super proud to be a part of.
I think collegiate wrestling is so unique and so fun. I mean, I know for me, I truly love throwing on the TV and watching wrestling. I know, and no, for those who are wondering, it's not WWE. That's not true wrestling. Okay. I'm watching true collegiate wrestling, and it's so cool to see it be such a big deal. But you'll find as you move further west in the country, it's not as big. For instance, when I was looking, when this podcast started, we thought of the Pacific Northwest as Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Montana, Utah, Wyoming, and then also Alaska. And when I included Wyoming, I was like, they have so many cool things over there. This is going to be awesome. And I look and I go, well, they have a wrestling team. Who else does? And I'm looking around, and there's some wrestling teams, but they're not D1. And then I find out Oregon State has one, but that's the only other one I can think of.
Yeah, Arizona State, but they're probably not Pacific Northwest. So, yeah, I'm trying to think of those schools you just said. Boise used to have a great program. You know, when I think of the West, really there's, I mean, gosh, there used to be only 11 Division I schools. There's probably less than that now, but basically California has Stanford, Cal Baptist, Cal State Bakersfield, Cal Poly. Hope I'm not missing one there. Arizona State, Oregon State, Wyoming, and I may have missed something in there, but really that's about it. Yeah, it's unfortunate. You know, it's certainly still strong in the Northeast, and even through the Midwest, there are a lot of great programs. But you know, we're fighting every day out here, and so it's funny because you know one of my former athletes and one of my former assistant coaches is the head coach at Oregon State, and you know, I think we feel like we have a bond with the Western schools because we know we kind of have to keep fighting to stay strong and to keep the sport relevant in the West. And so with not a lot of us out there, you know, we're always aware of it, and I think we're always trying to help each other out as much as we can.
Why do you think wrestling is so hard to maintain over here on the West Coast?
Well, you know, I don't know. I mean, you know, the sport as a whole took a big hit since the early 1980s, just with Title IX, you know, and it wiped out so many programs. And then there was just that period of kind of maintaining and just trying to stay in it. And then there all of a sudden started to be programs that were added. I mean, Cal Baptist is a Western school that added wrestling and just entered the Big 12 conference last year. You know, and that's, like I said, like we want them to do well. The Big 12 conference saw that them putting the effort to create a Division I program, and they said, we need to give them a home. We need to give them a place to compete. We need to support them. And I think all the coaches felt the same. And you know, so it's starting to slowly, you know, I think it's stabilized, and it's probably added a few programs in the last 5 years, which is a great sign, but it's at such a slow pace. And I think with the climate of collegiate athletics, it's hard for anybody to move at a fast pace. You know, women's wrestling's growing tremendously across the country at all levels. There's only a couple of Division I programs that sponsor wrestling, women's wrestling. But you know, there's things that are happening at the youth level, at the high school level, but to make it happen at the Division I level is pretty. I would say I'm not real optimistic because this, you know, stuff that's going on with NIL, with transfer portal, with the amount of money that's going in to sports like football and basketball, it's going to be hard for any other sport to grow at a very rapid pace. But I'm hopeful, you know, and I think the popularity of the UFC has helped wrestling. I think wrestling has established itself as the number one base for UFC, but also it's become, you know, I know sometimes even people in my world, as far as administrators, are like, man, you guys are crazy. You're not wired the same, and you're nuts, and you're animals. Well, now they see UFC and they're like, all right, wrestling's actually pretty, you know, they're at the base level of getting in, and kind of the professional level a lot of times of wrestling now. And so I think there's some things that are helping, but we need to get the NCAA tournament out west, and that's something that hasn't happened in a long time. And if the NCAA is not going to help in that, then how are we going to help grow schools out here in the West? You know, and they've talked about putting it in Arizona, putting it in Vegas, putting it in Denver. There's a lot of great options, but the NCAA's got to do their part. You know, they got to try to get that tournament moved out here, because really it's a great tournament. I think typically over 3 days they have around 100,000 people that come, and you want to grow it, you want to expose it, you got to move it around. You can't just put it in the same couple of places every year.
I was just talking with my fiance about getting out to Kansas City this upcoming year to go see it, because I think it's going to be a great thing to do, and it's truly amazing to watch. I wanted to touch on your 1997 season before we get more into the coaching side of things. So your 1997 season, to say the least, was amazing. Okay, you win another national title. You're also named Big 12 Athlete of the Year. You're also named the Oklahoma State Student Athlete of the Year, and you're at the top graduation for your senior year as well. That's a lot of things coming together. I mean, I can only imagine how you felt. How do you describe that?
Yeah, there was that season was certainly special, and I think I learned more in that season than I ever learned in the sport of wrestling in 1 year. So my junior year in the NCAA finals, early in the match in the first period, I pretty much completely dislocated my knee, tearing all but one ligament. I tore my ACL, my PCL, my LCL. I tore my meniscus. I tore my hamstring. I tore a ligament called a popliteal ligament that I didn't even know was in my knee. And so I had to, literally the doctor said, you're probably, the chances of you wrestling are, I can't tell you. Like that, my doctor was very real and said, I'm not going to sit here and tell you you're going to wrestle again. But we did as good as we could. And so that process of coming back from such a severe injury, and back then you didn't have medical red shirts or anything else. It was my last year. It was either get back on the mat and try to give it a go, or just call it a career. And during that process, there was a lot of times that I felt like I probably should call it a career. It was a lot of adversity and a lot of pain, a lot of complications. I actually had to go back in September and have a screw taken out of my knee that had caused a cyst, and so there was a lot that went into that emotionally. And then I got to a point, and actually my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and that was a turning point for me, because I was ready to hang it up. I was ready to call it quits, and I felt like there was no way I could do it. And I got that call from my dad, and I tell you what, it made me ashamed of myself. I mean, I was a 22, 23-year-old kid feeling sorry for myself and over a knee injury, over a sport, and yeah, it was important to me, but boy, that put things into perspective to me. And so when that really flipped in my brain, I decided, like, I'm not going to stop short of anything of getting back on the mat and doing everything I can to win a national title. And I went undefeated that year. And to be honest, like I said, the doctor said, if you get back, you're probably not going to wrestle till January. I remember having a conversation with him, and I said, I need to be on the mat on the first day, which was, the first weekend in November. And he said, he was awesome. He got him, instead of being a doctor and saying, no, you're not going to do it till January, he said, let's do it. Let's get you ready. And so I didn't miss a match that year. And like I said, I went undefeated. And so all of that really was, the overwhelming factor of winning a national champion and having my mom there, who had just finished chemo, and having her come down on the floor with me as I came off the mat was something that, was one of the most special moments in my life, one of the most emotional moments in my life. Being named, the Big 12 Athlete of the Year and the OSU Student Athlete of the Year and those things, those obviously I'm very proud of that. Like I said earlier, I always took pride that I did well in school. And I do believe there was always a connection. I believe there was no way I could have done what I did in the sport of wrestling if I hadn't been a good student. And so that year, actually myself, they used to come out with a rating, and I don't know the formula, but basically they take your GPA and they'd also take your season and your placement, and they put them all together. And the top three guys in the country were me, my teammate who also won a national championship, and my other teammate who was a runner-up. And that was pretty special that we were the top 3 guys in the country, academic All-Americans, across the board. We ranked 1, 2, and 3, and we were all teammates. And we were all in the NCAA finals. And that's something that was pretty cool. Stephen Schmidt and Eric Guerrero were the other 2. And from that moment on, I'm like, there's something to this, right? There's a reason. And I still believe that to this day as a coach.
Wow, that is a amazing story for 1997. Definitely something that's hard to not forget when you go through all that adversity, but also all those highs. And I think it's really cool. Your doctor said, "All right, let's go. Let's try to get you back."
Well, and I tell athletes to this day, I'm like, you have to try to do what you can to take control of your career. A doctor is going to be cautious. A trainer is going to be cautious. Your own body. I knew I wasn't ready, but I also knew there were a lot of circumstances that was playing into that decision. And I'm like, I felt like it was more important for me to push myself early and get on the mat than it was to set aside. I felt like setting aside was maybe going to cost me my season. And so I took it to my doctor, who I built a good relationship with. And, I think doctors do care about what we say, but if you sit there and you don't say anything, they're going to probably take the cautious route. And I was surprised that he said, "Let's do it." And, I was happy, but it was awesome to have that support from him. I couldn't have done it. I mean, I needed his release or I wouldn't have been on the mat.
Amazing. I see here that in 1998 and 1999, you were named a freestyle All-American. Can you tell people what a freestyle form of wrestling is? And also, how are you an All-American for 2 years after college?
Well, it's, so basically it's the Olympic styles, right? So when you see wrestling in the Olympics, you're going to see 2 styles. You're going to see freestyle and Greco-Roman. And so 2 years after I graduated from college, I dabbled a little bit, which basically I went to the U.S. National Championships in freestyle, and I placed in the top 8. So, that's kind of how you become an All-American. But I didn't ever really go full time. I started coaching, and I went to grad school, started my master's. And so I didn't really ever go jump into international style, as they call it. That's freestyle or Greco. I didn't really, throw my hat in it. I never, there were times that I look back and I wished I maybe would have. But at the same time, I truly wanted to become a coach, and I wanted to start my coaching career. And it's kind of hard to do that. So when you see these international athletes, Jordan Burroughs, obviously one of the most well-known, you got Kyle Snyder, Kyle Dake, David Taylor. I mean, you got these guys that have won world and Olympic championships. Their job is to wrestle. Now, back then, you didn't get paid to wrestle. You didn't. There were a few little places that you could get your training expenses paid for, but now these guys are able to make 6 figures and wrestle and compete. So it's definitely changed. It's great for the athlete, but back then, when you're trying to go to grad school and you're trying to coach and you're trying to feed yourself and your family, it's like you really didn't have a lot of options back then. And I didn't think it was the best idea for me. So I did go wrestle, like I said, at the U.S. National Championships in 98, 99, and placed both those years. And then that was the last time I competed in wrestling.
Okay. I saw you join the coaching staff over in Oklahoma State, and you were named the associate head coach in 2002. And in just a mere 2 years, you get named the assistant coach of the year in 2004. What's that like to just have that accolade now on the coaching side of things? Does it validate you a little more to be like, I can be a really good coach?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a great resume builder. And we won. Oklahoma State hadn't won a national championship since my freshman year in 1994. So for back in that time, that was a long drought to go from 94 till 2003. And so that first season, we won our first national championship. So we won 2003, 2004, 2005, and 2006. We won 4 national championships as a team. And that was special. To me, being a part of a team championship, even though it's certainly an individual sport, but man, I tell you what, I'm glad I won an individual title, but winning a national title, I wouldn't trade both of my individual championships, but I'd probably trade one of them. It's amazing. It's something to be a part of those kids' journey. And I was just I'd only been out of school 5-6 years. And to be on the mat every day with those guys and preparing them for the national championship, seeing them capture their dreams and seeing the feelings and the emotions that they had, just like I had went through, I mean, that made you feel like you were out there competing again. It made you feel young. And hosting that, hoisting that team trophy up and taking that team picture was something that man, I tell you, it's a special thing. And so to get that, to be named the assistant coach of the year, I think mainly because we won, that was our second national championship in a row, and I was the associate head coach. I mean, but I think it obviously, the most important thing was how much we were winning. I mean, that showed that we were doing a lot of things right. I felt like I was definitely doing things right. I felt like our organization was doing things right. I felt like our athletes first and foremost believed in us, and they were doing things right. They were doing what we asked out of them. They believed in us. We believed in our system, and when you do that, good things happen, and special things happen. And so that was a very memorable time in my coaching career.
That is so cool. And so I was going to actually say, do you know how many NCAA championships you won? But you won 4. How many, let's ask this. Do you know how many dual championships you won in that time?
Oh, man, no, I couldn't. I'd have to go back and look at that. But several. I was part of a couple of those as an athlete. I think we won my freshman year and we won my my senior year, and we went undefeated my senior year. And then the next 3 years, I believe we went undefeated and won national dual championships, but we didn't win individual. We didn't win the team title until 2003. But we had like a 78 match winning streak from my senior year through the next 2 to 3 seasons. We went undefeated as a team. So we definitely won those.
Yeah.
So we had several in there. I had to go back and look at the history to find that out.
So your short time at Oklahoma State, do you know how many All-Americans and how many NCAA champions you coached?
I'd have to go back and look, but I think the All-Americans was in the high 50s to 60s range. The national champions were in the in the high mid to high teens, I think. And I only I put those numbers, I remember I put those on my resume. And I only counted the guys that I personally worked with. I mean, Oklahoma State, we had several other national champions and several other All-Americans, but I kind of went out and picked the guys that I really felt like I was very involved in that, as a coach, more of their personal coach. So those off the top of my head, those numbers are out there somewhere, but it was a lot, and it was pretty cool to be. At the time we were the top of the top. We were the best program in the country, and coming to Wyoming was a little bit humbling. It was it was hard because I came in with a mindset of saying I only know how to win, and we're going to maintain that. We're going to do that here, and we definitely jumped to some great levels, but it was like, man, I wanted to win those national championships. I wanted to win those individual titles. I wanted to take home a team trophy, and it's something that's very hard to do in wrestling in Division I. It's super hard. There's not a lot of parity. It's the same. Typically, it's the same 5 to 5 programs that are actually challenging for a national championship. There's maybe another 5 that are typically in the top 10, so it's a challenge. But at Oklahoma State, we were the the king of the jungle.
So your answers for you: you got 3 dual championships as a coach. You have put 57 All-Americans and 16 NCAA champions.
There you
so
go.
you were pretty close.
Good,
all right.
good.
So you get hired. Sorry, what?
I said that's awesome that you that you came up with that. So I don't have to do the research now.
Next time you get asked that question, you go, oh, off the top of my head, I know.
Yeah.
So you get hired over to Wyoming on July 14th of 2008. You're announced as the 14th head coach in the program's history. And just like you stated a minute ago, all you know is winning, and it paid huge dividends because your first year there, you go 5-0 and share the WWC regular season title. What was that transition like going over to Wyoming, and what did you instill to make them know? Because not many people know, but the prior couple of years, Wyoming had struggled a little bit. So when you came in, what did you change and what did you establish in that culture to become winning again?
I think most importantly, just the expectations and that winning mindset. I mean, I know that I had a group of kids that wanted to win, and I don't feel like I think they felt like they didn't have the resources, or they didn't have the leadership to get them there, but they wanted to win. And they didn't necessarily have the talent, a lot of them. But I certainly believe that by coming in and setting that bar so high and saying, all I know is winning, and we're going to do it here. And I felt like that group instantly believed, and they supported the coaching change. That's something you worry about. Like, there were a lot of guys on that team that did have a great relationship with the prior coach. But I felt like, they knew I wasn't involved in that decision. I'm just the guy that's filling the role. And they certainly, I think, respected my pedigree and my background, and most importantly, my vision for the program. And so that group believed. They really did. They felt like we don't need to lose anymore. We don't need to be losers. We can be winners. And certainly they answered that challenge. And in fact, you have it. You probably have it in front of you, but we win 13-3, 15-3, something like that. That year, those 3 losses that we had that year were a result of me as a coach, because when I got here, the schedule was already done, and it was set. So the 3 matches that we lost are all 3 that I put on the schedule. So I added Oklahoma State, and then I actually got called by the NWCA to see if we wanted to attend national duels, which we didn't have any business being there, but I'm saying, sure, we want to wrestle the best team. So we lost to Iowa, we lost to Boise State, and then I scheduled a duel with Oklahoma State. Those are the only 3 losses that we had, and that was because I took over scheduling and added those. If I would have stayed out of it, we would have went undefeated. But, what's the point of being undefeated if you're not challenging yourself and wrestling, some of the best programs out there? And so I actually like, I was proud of our team in some of those losses more than I was in the wins. I remember one of our first duels that season was against Stanford, and our kids were so happy to win. And we came into the locker room, and our kids were they were hooting and hollering like they won the Super Bowl. And I started screaming at them, and their faces just turned because, they hadn't experienced victory. And I think that team had shut them out the year before. And they were so excited to beat them. And I'm like, we did not wrestle well. This isn't about the team score. This is about how we competed. We could have done this. We could have got bonus points here. We could have won this match. We could have, and they were, I think they figured out a lot about me, because I remember, again, we got beat quite bad by Iowa, and I brought them in the locker room, and I'm like, I'm proud of you guys. Like, you guys went out there and you fought. Like, that's a whole different level team. And a matter of fact, they probably won it that year. They won the national championship. And I'm like, we went out there and battled and we fought them. And you guys, nobody went out there and laid down and quit. Nobody laid down there and gave up before, and so I'm like, I may praise you in loss and I may be pretty critical in victory, and so I try to this day coach that way, that I'm not going to respond according to the score, according to the win, according to the loss. I'm going to respond according to how we competed. Did we compete the way that we prepared? Did we compete the way that we train? And so that year, we learned a lot about ourselves. Our guys learned about me, but we also learned we can win. We learned that we can have success. And we had a young man who was a freshman who became an All-American that year, who really anchored our team for the next several years, because we surrounded around him, because they said, man, if he can do it, if Joe can do it, we can do it.
Joe LeBlanc, correct?
Correct. I was just, there's a lot of building on belief, building and believing in each other, and believing in what we could do as a program. It was a really special team and a special season.
And on top of all that, they were led by an amazing coach, because at the end of that year, you were given the WWC Coach of the Year, the West Region Coach of the Year by D1CW. You were also the top rookie coach of the nation by Amateur Wrestling News. And on top of all that, you were nominated amongst your peers to go be a part of the 2009 National Wrestling Coaches Association Leadership Academy class. What was that like?
Yeah, it was just, I felt like it was justification that I was here to do a job and I can do it, and trust me. I mean, when I started at Wyoming, there was so much I didn't know about the coaching business, because, my duties at Oklahoma State were, I think, kind of focused and kind of narrow. And now I had to have my finger in every aspect of it. There was so much I didn't know about budgets. There was so much I didn't know about the recruiting aspect, the scholarship aspect. And so that year was very scary. I remember the first several months feeling like I was in over my head and I was just trying to fake it. I didn't want my team to know that I doubted myself. I felt like if they see me doubting myself, they're gonna lose trust. And so I just tried to fake that and pretend like I knew what was happening all the time, and pretend like I knew what was going on. And getting through that year, like I said, we learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about each other. I learned a lot about coaching. I learned a lot about myself. And so I think at the end of that year, it just felt good to go, man, this is something I can do. I can handle it. We got through a season. We made a lot of improvements, and now, let's just keep building and keep working.
That's so cool. And I saw that there was a lot of improvement. I mean, I don't think people understand the radical improvement that went on over the next couple of years. Just for some context and some highlights, 2009, the year, so it's been 2 years now you've been at the helm of the program. You go and you take the West Regional title and break a 24-year streak that Northern Iowa had. Did you realize at the time when you had broken that streak that it had been going for 24 years?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had, the year before we had fell short, I think, by 1 point. And that was heartache to know that we were that close in that first year of capturing a title. And there were so many places that we could have made that 1 point up. And we did, we should have won it that year, I felt like. And so, coming back that next year and taking that title for the first time, was awesome, and it was great because we were a small conference, and some smaller programs. But again, we were out trying to beef up our non-conference schedule, and we were wrestling some of the best teams in the country. So kind of felt like, man, we're competing against the best, and we can go in against this group of teams, and we can establish ourselves as the team to beat. And I think we did that over the next several years. And it was very special. I know, it was just validation for our wrestlers and the effort that they were putting in, the training that they were going through. there was a lot of validation to say this is worth it, because at the end we all felt good about it, whether you were a starter or whether you weren't, whether you proceeded to qualify for NCAAs or whether your season was over. We certainly had something very special to hang our hat on.
That is very true. Did you realize that you also were named the 2010 West Region Coach of the Year? So back-to-back years you take home that honor.
Yeah, that was cool. And obviously our fellow coaches in our conference are the ones that voted on that. And it's kind of funny. It's all those teams are still, they moved over to the Big 12, and a lot of those original coaches aren't coaching anymore. I kind of felt like a lot of programs saw what Wyoming was doing and said, man, we got to keep up. And it was great because it raised all of our level. And as much as you want to beat your competition, I think there's obviously a lot of respect amongst coaches, especially within our conference. I think we have a lot of respect amongst the coaches, and so for them to vote that, that meant a lot to me, obviously. And, I felt like they recognized the job that we were doing.
In 2013 and 2014, you guys beat North Dakota State to win the crown. How was that feeling?
Yeah, I think that was at home, and I think they had beat us in the regular season, and it was kind of funny because they showed up to Laramie maybe 4 or 5 days before the tournament, which was very unusual. And they, number one, Laramie's at 7,200 feet elevation, and we're the highest Division I school in the country. And so I think part of that thinking was we want to get there and adapt. We want to get there and acclimate. And I honestly felt like it probably maybe backfired on them because they had probably too much time sitting around, too much idle time thinking about it. And then I also think, you're there for 4 or 5 days. If you're not hydrating, and they were probably cutting weight, it could have fatigued them a little bit, So we had, we had basically one of the most perfect rounds of wrestling that you could have to finish the tournament and win it. We were behind. We were still in on it. But, man, we had guys just unbelievably step up and wrestle above their heads. We had so many victories that we had lost earlier in the year that we came back and won. And it was cool because it was by a very slim margin in front of our home crowd, and it was definitely a comeback. And so, yeah, I mean, that doesn't seem that long ago, it was quite a while ago, but I can remember that feeling, that guys just going crazy when we won that last match in overtime. We won at the heavyweight match. I think it was for 3rd and 4th that sealed it. And our guys were just, we're trying to calm them down. Like, don't do anything crazy. We can't cost us a team point, because they were definitely losing control. And it was pretty cool to see that elation.
All righty. So 2015, you're going to that transition to the Big 12. When you were hired in 2008, did you know eventually the transition to the Big 12 was going to take place?
No, that wasn't even on the radar. And then, through the Big 12, what had happened, and I'm trying to remember back here, is Nebraska had left and Missouri had left. Missouri went to the SEC and Nebraska went to the Big 10, and that dropped the teams from 5 down to 3, and they added West Virginia, so that took them from 3 to 4. So in the NCAA, if you are below 6 teams, you have to apply for a waiver. Well, they had always been granted a waiver with 5 teams just because the 5 teams were so good. Traditionally Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Iowa State is, they're a traditional powerhouse. Those 3 teams, and then the other 2, Missouri and Nebraska, were very solid as well. Nebraska was at the time better too. And so they'd always kind of granted them a waiver until they went from 5 to 4. And then they basically told them there's a time frame where if you guys can't find affiliates, then you're no longer going to be considered, I guess, a qualifying conference is kind of, not to get into the specifics. So then the Big 12 was scrambling a little bit. And honestly, at the time, they had reached out to the ACC, I believe. They had reached out to the Pac-12. Here's the problem is the ACC wanted the Big 12 to go to the ACC. The Pac-12 wanted the Big 12 to go to the Pac-12. We kind of got caught in the middle where we tried to form a super alliance to where we would actually stay the WWC, the Pac-12 could stay the Pac-12, the Big 12 could stay the Big 12, but then we would qualify together as a conference. And that was kind of where it was leaning to. And then the Pac-12 basically, I think, backed out because of their television contract, and it kind of only left two of us dancing. And so, yeah, I mean, that was something that we worked hard for probably a year or two in the talks. And when we got our foot in the door, it was something that I think we all felt was going to raise the level of our competition, raise the level of our recruiting, raise the level of the financial support that we were going to get from our university. And it certainly has been a great move for us.
So in that same year, you also had a wrestler get second place in the national title. Do you remember who that was?
Yeah, Bryce Meredith.
And he became the first Cowboy to wrestle in the finals since?
Reese Andy.
In?
1996.
That is correct. You are on today.
Well, thankfully, that was my time. Reese and I were a year apart. I think he was a year older than me. He was in the finals twice, and the first time was in '94, which is the first year I won it. So luckily, I remember some of that from an athlete, and so that kind of saved me because, yeah, I'm decent on Wyoming wrestling history. I know quite a bit, but yeah, it was pretty cool. Not only that, Bryce was a Wyoming native, and in 2013 we had Tyler Cox, who was a Wyoming native. He was our first Wyoming All-American since I believe the early 70s. And so for the state of Wyoming to be able to not only get behind and support their homegrown kids, but to live that experience with them probably made that even more special. I mean, here, that year that you're talking about, we were in Madison Square Garden. Here we are in the Big Apple, and I think there were a lot of Wyoming people around this state that were living in the Big Apple that weekend. Their hearts, their minds, their TVs were tuned in. I heard that you couldn't walk into a bar in Wyoming and that wasn't on the TV, and I believe it. So it was special, and obviously you always want to, when you come that close, it's heartbreaking, but it's nonetheless so special for a kid who hadn't even qualified for NCAAs. He had a very similar story to me, I believe, in the fact that he kind of came from nowhere, didn't qualify from the NCAAs as a freshman, and then transferred from North Carolina State to Wyoming, came back home to wrestle, and ended up in the NCAA finals. Very special story, and it'll be hard. He'll always be one of the best athletes I've ever coached.
That's extremely impressive and a hard feat to do. So props to him and getting that. In 2017 and 18, you were named the Big 12 Wrestling Coach of the Year. What was that like to just add another trophy to the shelf?
Yeah, that was cool. I think obviously you have the schools, the legacy schools, which is Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Iowa State, and West Virginia. When you're competing against those schools and you're in there battling, I think you get a lot of respect. And we've had some other programs that have done that in the last few years. Northern Iowa has done well. North Dakota State did pretty well. We've had some other programs that are affiliates sorry, I was looking for the word, affiliate members. And I think, you go up and compete with those legacy members, you get their respect really, really quickly. I think that year Bryce Meredith won a Big 12 title. Archie Colgan won a Big 12 title. Have two champions. That was the first time we had two champions. It's not easy. I mean, if you're winning a Big 12 championship, then you're competing for an All-American award here, 2 weeks later. So to have those guys win titles was very special, and to be named Coach of the Year, in a conference like the Big 12 conference, that's obviously probably one of the most special coaching awards that I'll have. I hope it's not the last. I hope that I can still accomplish here, as a coach, but that's going to be hard to top that one.
In 2019, you qualify 7 different wrestlers for the NCAA tournament, the championships. You also get as high as number 8 in the dual mat rankings. What was that like?
Yeah, I was unexpected. I think that year before we lost 7 starters, 7 seniors. We had a very young team. I believe that year we were at the South Beach Duels and we upset North Carolina State, who I think at the time was ranked number 4 or something. And I mean, it was on criteria, but it was just so unexpected. I mean, I didn't know what kind of team I had. I expected it to be a building year. I expected it to be a year where I needed to be patient. And then here we were, reeling off victory after victory and knocking off teams and knocking off Power 5 schools. And it was, certainly we had some very young, inexperienced kids who stepped up and really surprised me and made a huge impact for us. And that was cool, just because, like I said, graduating so many talented seniors, I thought, man, this is a year that I'm going to have to be patient, and it's going to be a year that we're going to face a lot of adversity, and we didn't. It was just surprising. It was really surprising that we kept things rolling and had such a great dual season. And that was neat, to see that. And the one thing I did learn is I think that year I don't want to say became overconfident as a coach. I just think I let my guard down, because I was set myself up for this expectation of rebuilding. And then we ended up having a fantastic dual season, and it tricked me into thinking that now we had the culture was set in place, the system was set in place, and now it's just going to continue to build and roll. And that's not how it is. You got to always keep your guard up, and you got to stay on your toes. And definitely I learned that, following that season.
And when you took down number 4th ranked NC State that year, that was also the highest ranked dual win in program history.
Yeah, and so the coach there is a former teammate of mine. He was a freshman when I was a senior at Oklahoma State, and then I actually coached him for the next 3 years. So, we obviously have a long history, and the duel ended in a tie, so it went to criteria. So both teams get up and we're shaking hands, and I get to Pat Popolizio, who's their head coach, and I'm like, and I shook his hand, and we just kind of look at each other, and he goes, "Who won?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." And so he's like, "I think you guys won." And I'm like, "I don't know. I have no idea who won." So by the time we get done shaking hands, the official stepped in and said, "You guys won on criteria." And then our guys just, went crazy. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I was certainly worried. I probably even said something before the duel, something to the effect of "Take it easy on us." So I won't get away with that one again. But I did. I thought we probably were going to get, our butts handed to us pretty badly, and we ended up having some amazing upsets and outstanding performances.
So overall, in your 16 years of Wyoming, you have a 75% win rate within the conference. You also have 3 Big 12 champions and have also had numerous conference champions on the individual level. You've really rebuilt Wyoming, and it's still going, right? I think, what would be the ultimate goal for you as a head coach at Wyoming?
Yeah, you know, I mean, obviously to compete and win a Big 12 championship is something that would be phenomenal. I think it would put this program on the map forever. You know, winning an NCAA team trophy would do the same. Having individual national champions, I think all those things are pretty much would really cement the legacy of this program. And like I said, really bring this program to a level that it's never seen. And you know, I do believe some of those things are possible. And I think, you know, we've definitely learned a lot about the sport. We've learned about the changing climate, the changing environment in college sports, especially over the last year. And I truly believe that this program is is a great place, you know. And I just turned 49 this summer, and you know, I love coaching as much today as I ever have. I think the job's harder than it's ever been. And so I look at that and I look at me as I'm not getting younger, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to coach. So I do have a sense of urgency to say, I want to do these things. I want to step out there and embrace that young man as he wins an individual national title, just like I did at that age. I'm excited to do that. I truly believe we're going to do that. I truly think the first step is to have, you know, in one season, to have 4 or more All-Americans. And if you do that, you're a top 10 team in the country. And that's something that I think is a reality. I think we can do it. I think we have guys in our room right now that can do that. And I want them to believe in that vision. And I think, you know, those are things that we can do. And like I said, I want to walk away from this program and from this sport, and I want to hopefully feel very confident that this program's in better shape than it was when I got here, you know, and that it's strong, and that whoever comes in and takes it over after me is in a great place to continue building. And I want to sit up in the stands and be the best fan there's ever been until I can't do it anymore, you know. And those are the things I look at. But I'm proud of the accomplishments we've made here, and I know that there's so many great things that yet for us to do, and that's exciting for me, you know. And to work with these guys, I tell you what, I wouldn't have picked a different profession, because they continue to make me feel young. As much as my body may feel old, when you're around these guys with passion, when you're around these guys that set high goals, it takes me right back to my college experience. So I feel like a college kid again. And, you know, that's pretty cool. So I know these guys can do some fantastic things. I'm looking forward to the season. I think there's some special things that are right on the horizon for us this year. And so that's what I wake up for every morning.
I don't think anyone has any doubt that you are going to leave Wyoming without making it better than when you found it. And that's very apparent right now. You could walk away and everyone would know you've done an amazing job. But we are so happy to still have you there. And it's wonderful to watch year in and year out. Let's talk about recruiting for just a brief minute. I know you're very busy, so talk about recruiting, and then I'll ask you a couple questions and we'll let you go on your way. But for recruiting, when you're looking at kids, what are some non-negotiables of your program that you say, you know, I'd love to have this kid, but they're not meeting X or Y or Z, and I can't let that slide?
Yeah, you know, we developed our I think the foundation of our culture, and we refer to it as living cowboy tough. And so we just say LCT a lot, but living cowboy tough is kind of is our mantra, and it's our code. The base of that living cowboy tough is the code of the West, you know. And I think, to me, you know, you live each day with courage. You do what needs to be done. You finish what you start. I mean, there's there's a list of things that are actually posted up in our locker room that we talk about daily, that not only are those the things that are going to help you become successful wrestler, they're going to help you get your college degree, but most importantly, when you're done with college, those are the things that are going to help you be a great man. And that's what we're, as much as I want to have this legacy of what we did on the mat, how many individual championships we won or team titles or whatever, at the end of the day, the reason I'm in this is, like I said, to be working with those young men, and to watch them walk away from this program as great young men, men that are ready to go out and be fantastic parts of this society, contributing people who are going to be law abiding. So when we go through that recruiting process, we present LCT. And obviously I'm a guy that's given a lot of guys second chances because I believe in forgiveness. I believe in God. I believe in, I think grace and forgiveness are super important in life. And I believe that, people deserve second chances. And so, it's hard in one hand to really say, I have non-negotiables. Yet I want to make sure, and I've had kids that have left my program that I've continued, and they've had to leave my program, but I've continued to be a part of their growth in their life because I don't want to see them fail as a human. I don't want to see them fail as a man. And so, I want to do everything I can in my power to help them find their success. And when I say success, the first thing we jump to as athletes is wrestling. Then you maybe think about academics, but there is a bigger picture. And I want those kids going out and giving back to the community. I think it's so rewarding for them to go out in our community. We have kids that volunteer for Special Olympics. They volunteer around the community. They go out and help local ranchers. And I think they understand what they get out of that. I really, when they go through those experiences, they see the benefit of giving back. And I think if you can start that at a young age, you're going to learn a lot about life. So in the recruiting process, we start presenting that right away to say, here's a list of things that we expect by living Cowboy Tough. And some of them are simple. You go to class, you come to practice, but then they get a little more complex. You come to practice with a positive attitude. That's not easy to do. Right? I can come to practice every day, but if I come with a bad attitude, I'm actually taken away from that environment. I'm actually sucking the energy out of that environment. So there's some things that are a little harder. So it's not just show up. There's things that you got to show up, but you also got to perform. And performance isn't necessarily hitting the best single leg or the best double leg. It's I got to come in and I got to be there for my teammate because he wants to stay 5 minutes later and work, and I need to be there for him, or I need to push him and help him when he's struggling. I need to pick him up. I need to bring a positive attitude when I see somebody that maybe doesn't have a positive attitude. I need to go over and say, hey, this is what we're working for. Remind them of why they're in there. So those are the things that I think, we try to instill from day one and in the recruiting process, make sure when they step on campus, they're already familiar with that.
One thing that I always found amazing about wrestling, beyond the toughness and the ethics, something that always strikes me when I talk with wrestlers, and I was one in high school as well, wasn't great by any means, but I always loved how when you ask someone, a coach or anybody, what has wrestling taught you? You say, well, it made me be a better man. And then it also goes, and it helped me with time management. I learned how to manage time really well. And so for you in that, what has wrestling helped you become better at, and why are you still gravitating towards the game?
Well, I always say one of my least favorite wrestling quotes is the quote that after wrestling, everything in life is easy. And I tell my guys that I'm like, I don't like that quote because I've lived enough life to know that life's not easy. And I feel like sometimes we put wrestling on such a pedestal to go, it's the toughest sport. It's the most demanding sport. It's the hardest sport. It's the most disciplined sport. And there's no doubt about that. I truly believe that wrestling brings all those things. But to me, life is hard. Wrestling is very helpful to help you deal with life. And that's what I think is the most special thing about the sport is you said it early at the beginning of this podcast. I can't look at a guard and say, hey, help me double this guy up, right? I can't do that. You're going to find yourself in life where you're on your own and you got to fend and fight for yourself. You're going to find that in life. You're not going to always have somebody pick you up. Now a lot of I don't want to just say kids, because even young adults, a lot of young adults, a lot of kids have their parents who will do anything for them. But what they're probably going to find out in most cases is that one of these days their parents aren't going to be there for them anymore. And so I've had to endure the passing of my father at a pretty young age, unexpectedly. I had to endure the passing of my mother here a few years ago. I've had to endure some things that don't even compare to the hardest day I ever had, the hardest week I ever had, or the hardest month I ever had in wrestling. But wrestling taught me how to deal with adversity. Wrestling taught me how to stand up and fight for myself when nobody was there to fight for me. Wrestling taught me how to defend myself. And so the discipline and the sacrifice also, and I think that's kind of what I'll finish that up with is if you want to be successful, sometimes you got to let go of something else. You can't have everything, So that's what sacrifice is about. Sometimes if I want something so bad, and I found this to be very true in life, I got to let go of something else. I got to sacrifice something. And in wrestling, I think sacrifice is so important. And most importantly, it's like, hey, I got to sacrifice. I got to miss a meal or two. That's why that weight cutting, that's the one thing that almost every wrestler has to face throughout their wrestling career. And so if anything, they learn a little sacrifice there, right? Like, man, to make weight, to wrestle, and to win this week, I got to maybe skip a meal. I got to get an extra workout in. So those are things that I think, are very beneficial. And to me, I think wrestling is the greatest sport in the world. And for that reason, because it directly mirrors life. But life is so much harder. And I felt like, man, some of the things I've faced in life, I'm not sure I would have got through them the way that I did without the sport of wrestling in my life.
Of course. I really appreciate your time. I want to ask you just 5 questions we asked to everybody. Are you okay with that?
Rapid fire. Yeah. Give them.
All righty. You are at a gas station. You're about to go on like a really long road trip, however long is long to you. What's your go-to snack and your go-to drink?
Okay. I do this a lot. So my go-to drink is Mountain Dew Live Wire. Get a little Live Wire, gives me the old jitters. My go-to snack is barbecue corn nuts.
Ooh, that's a good pick.
Nobody wants to be in the car with me when I'm eating it, especially my niece and my kids. They complain when I break out the barbecue corn nuts, but that's my go-to.
Oh, they're so good though. It's worth it. It's worth it.
So good.
Who's your favorite athlete of all time?
Oh man, I'd have to say to this day probably got to be Barry Sanders. Another Oklahoma State guy. I idolize him to this day. I watch it. When I see him running clips on Twitter to this day, I still watch him. I watch him all the way through. It's amazing. I just love to reminisce me watching him as a young boy and as a fan. I wasn't that young, I guess, but I was in high school, and golly, he just did things I didn't think were possible.
What's your favorite time of the year?
Summer, for sure. Yep, especially in Wyoming. I would say in Oklahoma, I would maybe say spring, because summer gets so dang hot, but summer in Wyoming is really beautiful. And I got about 10 yards from a bear last week up in the Tetons. I've been fly fishing. I've been riding my horses. I've been ATVing. I love summer up here.
That's amazing. What's your favorite sports team at the high school, college, and pro level? However, you cannot pick anywhere you've coached or you have played for.
Okay, well then my favorite high school would have to be Laramie High School. I didn't play for him or coach for him. That's my son's team. So that's at the high school level. At the college level, my favorite program. Oh my gosh, golly. See, that's a tough one because I don't like colleges except for oh man. Let me think on that for a second. My favorite college. Oh, I'm gonna be such a wuss. So I'm gonna be a wuss. I don't want to be a wuss. So I'm gonna say my daughter's University of New Mexico, and my son is going to play baseball at Rose State in a junior college next year. But that's kind of such a wuss cop out. That I will go. You know what? I've always liked Oregon State. So there you go. I've always liked Oregon State. They're the same colors as my alma mater. I've liked my time in Oregon. My buddy's coaching there. I hung out with the baseball coach and had a lot of fun last year. So I'll just go Oregon State. And then you can't accuse me of being a wuss. And then pro, of course, I haven't coached or competed there. So I'm just going to give you my top. St. Louis Cardinals, Buffalo Bills, Josh Jacks. Just got a box of Josh Jacks. I see your Josh Jacks back there. So Buffalo Bills, St. Louis Cardinals, and I don't even have an NBA team. So there you go. Oh, the Denver Nuggets, of course, they won it.
Oh, there you go. I had a close friend who actually went to the University of Wyoming. She graduated 2 years ago, and I said, "What's cool in Wyoming? I want some stuff because, as you can tell, I'm an avid collector of different types of things." And she said, "Well, we have like these Josh Jacks," and I said, "Well, what are those?" And she goes to the store, takes a photo, sends me in, goes, "You want these?" And I was like, "Send them over." So this is a couple of years ago, but I kept the box. I actually haven't even eaten the cereal, but the box will forever be here.
Sweet. I like it.
And then lastly, are you a country music fan?
I am a huge country music fan.
So you know who Luke Combs is?
I know Luke Combs.
Luke Combs has a song called "Doing This." And his opening line is, "Someone asked me once in an interview, what was growing up like? Where'd you go to school? And what would you do if you weren't doing this?" So my question to you is, if you weren't a head coach, if you weren't the head coach of Wyoming and you weren't able to coach wrestling, what would you be doing?
I think I would be in construction or carpentry. I love to build. I wish I had a sweet shop with all the best tools. But I do love building. I do love constructing. And so that's, I think, and that's what I do a lot of times. I tinker around and build stuff. I actually just, I got a 40 by 40 steel building delivered last week that I am erecting on my property. And I'm going to try to do as much of it as I can on my own. And it scares me to death, but it is a challenge. I find those challenges, and I find a lot of satisfaction when you get something built. So I would say that.